Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Today we're looking at Kathryn Kuhlman's book, Nothing is Impossible with God.
Oh, a classic.
It really is. And we're focusing on this incredible story about a scientist, Dr. Richard Owellen, his wife Rose, their baby daughter, in a moment that really makes you think about healing in a whole new way.
It's a story that I think speaks to a lot of people because it brings together faith and science.
Yeah, exactly.
Dr. Owellen actually first encountered Kathryn Kuhlman's ministry when he was working on his PhD in chemistry. He was singing in her choir.
Wow.
Yeah. Met his wife Rose there.
Oh, how wonderful.
And Miss Kuhlman even officiated their wedding.
You can't get much more of a foundation of faith than that.
Right.
But, life can be unexpected.
Hmm.
When their daughter, Joann, was born, there were these little signs, things that weren't quite right.
Yeah, it wasn't just, being a newborn. There was this bruise on her bottom when she was born. The doctor kind of dismissed it at first, but then she was fussy, having trouble feeding. One leg was constantly bent, pulled up. Ooh, just little red flags that maybe something a bit more serious was going on.
And as Joann got older, did those concerns throw too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She couldn't straighten her leg. She was in constant pain. Doctor's visits were becoming like a regular routine.
I can only imagine how stressful that is for parents.
Yeah.
Especially, parents who are so grounded in their faith, like the Owellens were.
Dr. Owellen, with his scientific background, he noticed something particularly alarming about the crease pattern on Joann's thigh. Medically, it's called a pathological gluteal fold.
Okay.
It's often a sign of a hip issue.
So in came the official diagnosis.
Yeah, likely a dislocated hip. They were facing the possibility of braces, surgery, potentially a lifetime of disability for their little girl. It's the kind of news that just rocks your world.
Oh, yeah, definitely tests your faith.
Absolutely.
Did Dr. Owellen ever share how he felt during that time?
He did. He talked about feeling confused, even angry. Here they were, devout Christians, and their baby was going through this. He was really questioning, why would God allow this to happen?
I think a lot of people, regardless of their beliefs, can connect with that feeling of why me or why my child?
Yeah, it's a natural human response to suffering.
So what happened next? Did they immediately turn to prayer for healing?
They did, but it wasn't their first thought. Rose had been going to Kathryn Kuhlman's miracle services for years, and she suggested taking Joann to one. It was like a step of faith, a decision to trust in something, beyond what they could understand when the medical options seemed so limited.
So they were putting their hope in something that a lot of people would consider outside of traditional medicine.
Right.
What was one of those services like? Can you kind of paint us a picture?
Imagine a room just buzzing with anticipation. People from all walks of life. The atmosphere was electric, this mix of hope, faith, a bit of desperation even. And in the middle of all of this, you've got little Joann, uncomfortable, in pain, adding to the tension that was already there.
Wow. Sounds intense.
Yeah.
Did anything happen during the service that gave them a reason to hope?
There was this small but significant moment.
Okay.
As Miss Kuhlman was speaking, Rose noticed that Joann's tiny toes, they had been curled up. They started to relax.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was the first sign of change, this little flicker of hope.
I can see how a mother's intuition would pick up on something like that.
Absolutely.
So did they try to get closer to Miss Kuhlman after that?
They did. Rose just felt this pull to get Joann to the platform, to be closer to Miss Kuhlman. And as they're making their way through the aisle, they actually bumped into Miss Kuhlman herself.
Okay, now I'm on the edge of my seat. What happened next?
The whole room just erupted in prayer. Everyone focused on this tiny baby. You could just feel the energy. Miss Kuhlman, she gently touched Joann's toes. No pulling, no forcing, just a light touch. And then...
Don't leave me hanging.
And then Dr. Owellen, the scientist, he saw something he could never have imagined. Joann's leg, the one that had been so twisted, it started to straighten.
Oh, wow.
Right there, in front of everyone. No one was touching her leg, no force or anything.
Incredible.
It was an instant transformation, like something out of a movie.
So is Dr. Owellen, a scientist, witnessing something that defies all medical logic? I can only imagine what was going through his mind at that moment.
Yeah, he talks about how his logical mind was screaming that this was impossible, but there it was right in front of him. It really forced him to rethink what he knew about healing, about faith.
Did they go home after that?
They did, and the relief, the joy, it was overwhelming.
I bet.
Joann was moving freely, playing without any pain.
Wow, a complete healing.
Absolutely. It was like she suddenly caught up on all that lost time.
But I'm sure there were still questions in their minds.
Oh, of course.
Especially with Dr. Allen's scientific background. It's natural to want some kind of confirmation, even after a healing as dramatic as this one.
All right. They took Joann back to the orthopedic surgeon.
Oh, to the same one who had diagnosed her.
Yeah, and he was just baffled. He couldn't find anything wrong with her hip.
Like it never happened?
Exactly. Then they went to their family doctor, too.
Hey, what did he say?
He examined Joann and just acknowledged, this is the hand of God.
Wow. Even in the face of that kind of evidence, sometimes the only explanation is a miracle.
Right.
Years later, did Dr. Owellen ever talk about what this experience meant to him?
He did. It's really interesting to hear his perspective as both a scientist and a man of faith. He actually said that he didn't see the healing as a reward for their faith. They didn't have that unshakable, claim it kind of faith at the time. He saw it as God's mercy.
That's a really powerful distinction. It's not about earning a miracle, it's about grace.
It-
And I think that's really comforting for people to hear.
Yeah. You don't have to be perfect to experience God's love and power.
Dr. Owellen also talked about the difference between faith in God and the faith of God.
Oh, yeah, that's an important point.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. Faith in God, he says, is something most of us have, that belief that God is capable of incredible things. But the faith of God, he describes it as a gift from the Holy Spirit.
Right.
It's a deeper level of trust, a knowing that goes beyond our understanding.
So what would you say to someone listening who might be thinking, well, I believe in God, but I've never seen a miracle like this?
Well, I think Dr. Allen's experience challenges us to consider that maybe miracles are more common than we think. Maybe we're just not looking for them, or we dismiss them too quickly as just coincidences or luck.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in everyday life and lose sight of the extraordinary.
Exactly. This story reminds us to keep our minds and hearts open to the possibility.
There's also this theme of surrender in Dr. Owlen's story. He and Rose didn't try to force a certain outcome. Right. They surrendered their situation to God and let his will be done.
And in that surrender, they experienced something amazing.
That idea of surrender is so powerful. It's about letting go of our need to control everything and trusting that there's a higher power working things out, even when we don't understand how.
Absolutely. And it's not about being passive either. We still have to do our part, but we also have to acknowledge there's a limit to what we can control, and that's where faith comes in.
So what would you say is the biggest takeaway from Dr. Owlen's story for someone who might be struggling with their own faith or going through something difficult?
Well, I think there are a few powerful takeaways. First, it reminds us that nothing is truly impossible with God. Even when things seem hopeless, when logic and reason tell us otherwise, miracles can still happen.
Yeah.
And then the importance of surrender, letting go of that need to control and trusting in a power greater than ourselves.
And lastly, sometimes the most incredible things happen when we combine our efforts with an openness to possibilities that we might not even understand yet.
It's about taking that leap of faith, stepping outside our comfort zones, and embracing the unknown.
Dr. Owlen's story really makes you think about faith and the power of believing. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to turn it over to you, the listener. What really stood out to you in Dr. Owlen's story? Was it that initial struggle when they got the diagnosis, or maybe the decision to look for a different kind of healing? Or maybe it was how his perspective shifted, as a scientist?
Yeah, it really makes you think about your own experiences with faith and healing. Have you ever been in a situation where logic just doesn't give you the answers? Where it feels like something beyond what you can explain just stepped in?
It's so inspiring how Dr. Owellen didn't shy away from his scientific background.
Right.
He actually used it to make the miracle of Joann's healing even more powerful.
What I find really amazing is that he didn't see science and faith as being at odds with each other. He recognized that medicine has its limits, but he was also open to the idea of divine intervention. It's like a more holistic way of thinking about healing.
It definitely challenges us to rethink our own beliefs about what's possible. Do we limit ourselves by holding on too tightly to what we think we know? Or are we willing to consider things that we might not understand yet?
I think it's about realizing that what we know is always changing. Something that seems impossible today might have a scientific explanation tomorrow. But for now, we can just embrace the mystery and be amazed by the power of faith and the potential for these incredible miracles.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this amazing story, I want to leave you with a thought. What if we approached life with a little more openness to the possibilities? What if we dared to believe that nothing is truly impossible with God?
And what if God's mercy is closer than we think? It's not about earning it, it's about being open to receiving it.
Dr. Owlen's story really shows us that miracles aren't exceptions. They're proof of the love and power that surrounds us all. It's a world where hope has the final say, where healing can happen, and where faith, together with what we do, can lead to amazing things.
It's an invitation to dig deeper into our own beliefs and experiences, to be okay with not having all the answers, and to never stop believing in the power of what seems impossible.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep believing.